welcome to Career View. This is the podcast where we ask questions students want to know when it comes to pursuing a career path. I'm your host, Nirajit Sharmal, and each episode I will ask questions on behalf of students across the country from secondary schools and universities what they want to know when it comes to pursuing their dream job. For this episode, we'll be asking our top questions who have been submitted by students on our Career View website who are aspiring to become engineers. Now, to answer these questions today, we're joined by 27-year-old mechanical engineer Calum Macdonald, who is currently working as a project manager within the construction industry, where he looks at areas such as HVAC design, thermal modelling, and energy performance for large infrastructure buildings. Now, Calum is another example of someone who started their career as an engineer, but realised it wasn't for them. So, let's get into it. Okay, so Calum, it is so great to have you here. Now, how's everything going?
Yeah, good. It's been an interesting week, very eventful week, but otherwise, yeah, very good.
Fantastic, Calum. And, before we get into our questions asked by students about the mechanical engineering role that you studied during university, the first thing I want to know from you is why did you study engineering?
Yeah, for me, the interest in mechanical engineering was kind of my interest in passion and understanding how things worked and better understanding of how things were created. I guess always being a kid and being one of the first persons to go to in terms of the library, looking at books in terms of the dissections of machinery and things like that. That was my big allure for engineering. And ultimately that's kind of what drew me towards mechanical engineering, as well as it being very broad in that sense of, multiple aspects, multiple little components as well. So that's what kind of drew me to the allure of being a mechanical engineer. And then I guess in terms of that definition of being a mechanical engineer, you'd have to be centered around, solving problems and understanding how things work.
It's fascinating to hear your perspective because students who pursue mechanical engineering, including myself, have so many different reasons why they chose the pathway and how they define the role and define the career. But for you, when did this realization first hit? Or was it always there?
For me, definitely, I think it was, as I mentioned, just having those books that show the dissections of machinery, the dissections of how things worked, and always being the first person to want to know how things worked, or, if my parents got rid of an old fax machine, pulling it apart and figuring out what the hell was inside it, sort of thing. That's kind of what led me down that early pathway in terms of, maybe engineering was for me.
Absolutely interesting. Jumping into our questions that we have for you, Calum, the first question that we have for you asked by students is, how did you decide what field of engineering you wanted to pursue? Understanding you have quite a lot of options to choose from, whether it be mechanical, civil, chemical, electrical, software, just to name a few.
Yeah, for me, obviously, as you mentioned, there is lots of engineering fields. I was contemplating between chemical as well as obviously mechanical. For me, ultimately came down to, choosing an engineering field which was very broad and very practical across multiple areas. For me in particular, I didn't really want to be locked into one thing, being a structural engineer, civil engineer, or a hydraulics engineer. I kind of wanted to take a step back and, leave my options open later in life. So that's why I kind of went down the mechanical engineering path.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I can understand you wanting to keep it broad and having more options. Now, can you share with us what this decision-making process looked like for you? Did you have any other criteria to consider?
For me, look, the decision-making again was, down to it being broad. And then secondly, those were the things that I was passionate about at the time. So, I do still enjoy, machinery such as cars, motorbikes, all that stuff. I love to, pull them apart or work on my own car myself. So ultimately, being a mechanical engineer was kind of, in that regard, I guess, a no-brainer for me.
Oh, so that fit really well. Really good to know. So, Calum, the next question that we have for you is, what are the highlights of studying engineering at university? And if there were any moments that made you realise this was the right fit for you?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. While studying, it kind of, definitely opened my eyes in terms of engineering, in terms of working together in a team to solve a problem. I mean, the best moments at uni, reflecting back upon it, were those times where I was working late or working with a team as part of to complete a group assignment or a lab work sort of thing, working together and, pooling our resources and all of us just trying to figure out what the hell we're doing, how we're going to get through this and complete this assignment. So that was, super, super fun, definitely a highlight of university. And that is kind of, again, what opened my eyes up in terms of being an engineer.
Really interesting there. Next question that we have for you, Calum, is did you have a backup plan?
For me at university, not so much. It was kind of really, as I mentioned, really focused on trying to be an engineer and whatnot. Kind of looking back now and reflecting now that I've had a chance to leave university and to the engineering field, there probably would have been other areas that I would have probably succeeded in, probably more along the lines of probably business management or stakeholder engagement sort of thing. I do find those areas very interesting now, especially communication. Ultimately, science communication is something that engineers do struggle with, to try and communicate ideas as well as trying to communicate solutions to clients. So those are areas that I probably would have been a bit more interested in as well.
So apart from some of the areas you mentioned to complement your engineering studies, is there any other areas you can recommend to anyone who is currently studying or looking to pursue engineering based on what you've seen in the industry and possibly what's trending right now and in the near future?
Definitely. I think for students now, obviously the big thing that all the companies are focusing on is in terms of technology development, and then as well in terms of renewable energies and integrating that into existing systems. So in terms of those kind of conversion and transformation plans to be set in place for companies, that would probably be a big one. Really
good to know. Next question that we have for you, Calum, is how can one prepare for university life studying engineering?
Early on when I started university, the advice I got from multiple lecturers was treat it as a 9-to-5 job and give your weekends free. You're a uni student, you get there and you're like, no, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't have to listen to them. That advice I kind of set in place towards the back end of my studies, and it made my life at university a hell of a lot easier and a lot better. If you just focus on treating it as a 9-to-5 job, even if you sacrifice, a little bit longer hours so you can have Friday as well free, so you can go out Thursday as well, at least you got the weekends to yourself to kind of chill out and relax. But definitely treat it as a 9-to-5 so you don't have to do something every day.
Great advice there. Treating it as a job as early as you can, and then probably preparing yourself for the real world and to some extent. But, apart from treating it as a job, how did you find the whole experience? I mean, engineering is a common perception that it is a very difficult course. There is a lot of challenges. How did you find that experience, and what were really the main challenges for you?
Yeah, look, it's definitely challenging at times. There definitely are some hard assignments, some hard exams. People do walk out disappointed at times. But overall, I think the biggest thing that I learned in university in terms of getting through it is, trying to develop a good cohort of friends that you can rely on to help yourselves, bounce ideas off, study together and whatnot. The other thing which I probably really should have taken advantage of much earlier on in my university career was approaching lecturers and approaching tutors outside of hours and asking them for help, sending them emails about questions or scheduling a time for 10 minutes just to catch up and just run through a specific item that you might be struggling with. I mean, for me, especially when the back end, when I actually started implementing this really kind of accelerated my accelerated my studies, and then as well helped me improve my grades overall.
Great advice for anyone who's listening out there in terms of what they can do in preparing for the whole lifestyle that university does have to offer, and being very strict to a schedule and treating it like a job. Next question that we have for you, Calum, is how did you find a job once you graduated? What was the process for you in terms of applying for roles in your field?
So this is something that I guess a lot of people are going to struggle with graduating, and that's in terms of actually applying and getting their first job. The first job is always the hardest to get. You come out of university with little experience and you're relying on your grades and you're relying on whatever vacation experience or internship experience you can have. And then from there, for me, getting my first job was a matter of literally applying to about 20 different companies for their graduate positions. I cast a wide net, and then I started to get a few offers, and then from there I was able to make a bit more of a decisive decision. I guess my only recommendation for those that are applying for their first job is look for a company that is fairly broad. Look for a larger company with multiple opportunities. When you leave university, you don't know exactly 100% what field you want to go down or into. If you apply for a broader company, you have lots of opportunities to expand and dip your toes in different pools and try and test out, see what suits you.
And would you say that stems a lot from the fact that you studied mechanical engineering as being a broader engineering field, or do you think that's also applicable to some of the other engineering specializations?
I definitely think it's applicable to the other engineering specializations. I mean, for me, studying as a mechanical engineer and then moving on to work as a design manager and project manager as well, those opportunities may not be as easily to jump into if you were at a smaller company where they do rely on people that are, I guess, a bit more experienced to ultimately run those roles. Whereas a larger company, there's a lot more room for you to move into, and there's a lot more people for you to rely upon to assist you rather than just one or two.
Okay, really good to know. Calum, the next question that we have for you is how different is working in industry compared to studying?
Yeah, so working in industry, I guess, compared to studying, is very similar in some regards. You're all working together to solve a problem. It's not so much you have your set assignment groups anymore. You have almost an entire company to work with or work along with. And then I guess as well in terms of studying, the answers are available to you because you can actually approach those industry leaders, which would be the equivalent of a lecturer at university. And you can ask them, how do I do this? What should I be looking for? What's the best way to do this? And in some cases, they'll give you the answer, or some cases, they'll give you direction. I mean, that's the biggest difference between studying and working in the workforce.
But you're building these behaviors, these habits during the time you're studying. You're not just actually reading a book, completing an exam, doing assignments, but you're actually understanding how you are going to work in industry. When did you realize this, or did this happen quite naturally, or just looking back on it, this is what you observed?
I guess naturally it happens at university. You're kind of forced into these groups. Well, maybe it's not natural, but you're forced into these groups to work together. And then you've got to carry that mentality forward as you leave university because, that's how the workforce works. And then reflecting back on it, you start to realize oh yeah, this is very similar in some regards.
How much would you say is applicable of what you studied to what you actually apply right now in industry?
For me, so I studied mechanical engineering at university. My first job was working as a building services engineer, so working in HVAC. So that looks at heating, ventilation and cooling for facilities as well as energy performance and efficiencies. So for me, it was a very, very small percentage of what I studied at university. The maths is very applicable, and that maths is utilised a lot today still. But overall, in terms of the actual principles relating to mechanical engineering, it's very small.
Did that frustrate you in any way? The fact that not a lot of is applied, or how did you react to that when you were actually finally in industry?
When I was finally in industry, and I started to realise that a lot of the work was centred around, calculations and minute details, that's when my career path kind of took a turn. And that's when I realised that, look, maybe being a detailed engineer, whether it be services or whether it be, designing a particular element for a Formula One racing team, wasn't for me. And, kind of took a step back and realised, I wanted to be more on the high-level management sort of side in terms of steering the direction of the project rather than being boots on the ground, designing that one little element.
Understood. And sometimes you unfold as you go. And that's probably what happens for a lot of different people. Once you're in industry, it's so much to consider and so many different options to actually look at. Calum, the next question that we have for you, and by far one of the most popular questions we get across all students, is what is the salary range when starting out and how far can it go? And if you mind sharing a very honest perspective of, your experience and what you've observed in industry as well in your chosen field.
Yeah. So as I started out as a mechanical engineer, bear in mind all figures that I give do include super. It started out as roughly about $70,000 for a first year entry level grad. As I mentioned, working as a mechanical engineer in a building services team. From there, my pay progressed slightly as part of the team after 2 years experience, though the biggest jump that I experienced is when I stepped away from being an engineer and started working as a design manager and project manager. So in total, I've been out of university about 5 years, and I've seen that pay almost double in value in the last 5 years, just from purely stepping away from engineering and focusing more on that management side of things.
Fantastic. And to see a huge jump over the last 5 years for your salary, nearly doubling, has that put more pressure in terms of having a good work-life balance? Do you get time for yourself, or are you more pressurized and more under the pump as you've gone and progressed further?
To be fair, I think it's almost taken a step backwards in some regards because working as a mechanical engineer, you're stretched pretty thin across multiple projects. You're meeting those project deadlines set by the project manager. And the project manager, I guess, kind of our expectation is we're getting people to do the work and then we're compiling that final output, which is then delivered to the client. Ultimately, we can't really have input and we can't really speed up the process any more than driving those engineers to work harder. So I guess in terms of work-life balance, I felt it improve significantly from stepping away from being a mechanical engineer. That's
so interesting. Many would think it would be more, but to know that's the opposite effect for yourself now was really great to hear. Next question that we have for you, Calum, is what keeps you driven and inspired with the role and the work that you do every day?
So for me, working as a project manager, I work mainly in the construction industry. And for me, what keeps me motivated is, I mean, this may sound counterintuitive, but when things go wrong, I enjoy the rapid problem solving. I mean, that's ultimately tying back to being an engineer, is in terms of solving problems as quickly as possible and trying to come up with a solution and look at all the solutions possible. So for me, working in that, problem solving aspect and environment, and as well as seeing those elements go from being detailed design drawings to ultimately being constructed on site and having that final walkthrough. That's my motivation, I guess, for my role now.
Really good to know. Last question that we have for you, asked by students, is do you see yourself in any other career paths in the future with the skill set you've developed as a mechanical engineer and project manager in the last 5 years?
Yeah, for sure. For me, ultimately, I think I would like to go down a path where it's more working, as I mentioned, high-level strategy. So more looking towards the management of companies or projects and helping them develop ideas and business cases to then ultimately be put out and develop those ideas. So really early on, conceptualization of ideas and then carry that forward. And
did you ever think that would be an option when you studied engineering?
No, definitely not at university. I mean, you're very driven into the numbers, the calculations, the group assignments, the laboratories. You don't really understand that, engineering can lead you down a much broader path. There is multiple opportunities there. People see, engineer on your resume and they see, look, this guy's a problem solver. This person is going to be able to, help us resolve any issues we have. They're going to be very methodical. And that's, I guess, very much looking back and reflecting upon myself, that's very much why I enjoy those problem solving aspects, So that works.
Works well. Calum, thank you so much for jumping onto the show today. And that wraps up all our questions that we have. For our listeners who have more questions for Calum that did not feature on our list today and would like to connect with him, just visit our website, careerview.com.au. This is where you'll find Calum's profile and you can email him with more questions, which I'm sure, as always, would be happy to answer them.
100%.
And please don't forget to submit your questions that were not answered on this episode to young professionals who have been able to experience that and share their knowledge. Calum, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Any final words for anyone who's looking to potentially explore this pathway of mechanical engineering and even working in an industry one day?
Yeah, look, stick with it. As I mentioned, aim for the bigger companies, look for those broader opportunities, and 100% just say yes to everything. You don't know what you really want until you're there in that situation. So if anyone presents an opportunity to say, hey, can you help me out with this? Just say yes. Put your hand up to it and give it a crack and see what happens.
Thank you very much, Calum.
No worries. Thank you.